One of the guys in church, he said to me, you know, she flirts with everyone. He said, she's even been flirting with me, your best friend. And so I did get a phone call once at home while she was there. He'd found out, telling me, you do know that your wife was having an affair with... I've got photographs, all sorts of stuff. I came home early. Little baby boy was sitting in the living room. No one around. I went upstairs. That was a betrayal. For me, you know, I'm his Christian brother.
Every L podcast. Every L podcast.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. I'm your host, Matt Brown, and you're listening to the
Every L podcast.
Each episode, we'll have a different guest come on and talk about when life hands you an L, is it really a loss or is it something else?
Because not every L's a loss.
So sit back, relax, or do whatever you guys do to get comfortable as we get into this. Let's go. Welcome everyone to another episode of Every L podcast, where we have different guests come on each episode and talk about things in their life where they hoped it would go right, instead it went left. But then only through having conversations, upon reflection, they decide whether or not turning they took, was it appropriate for their life or was it a hindrance for their life? That's what we're going to discuss today at length with a certain individual who I'm so honored and so privileged to have jump on and share. This individual has been someone who I've known for a couple of years now, and he's just, how do I put this simply? So he is a guy who I can have a conversation with and feel there's no ulterior motives. He's just a down to earth, anybody that you would just meet on the street who's just kind hearted and nice. He's just willing to give so much of himself, partly because that is the job he's chosen to do or he's been chosen to do. But he does it with sincerity. He does it with authenticity. He does it with a smile on his face. And he's just pleasant. He's just welcoming. And there's very few people that you ever find in your life that is like that and consistent with it. And I like to give people their flowers while they're here rather than their tombstone. And this gentleman is an amazing human being. I'm grateful to have him in my life and have him in my family's life. And I'm just so honored to know that he's willing to come and share, because as much as from the outside looking in, he looks like he has everything together. I'm not naive to feel that that's always been the case. So I think for people to see, or should I say hear, his side of events, what he's gone through, I think it would just be amazing. So that's why you can understand why I'm so grateful to have someone like him on here today to discuss things. So before we jump into that, I'm gonna ask Geoff to just introduce himself, who he is, what he's about. I remember I'm doing a thing where for those that may be visually impaired and can't see, just describe yourself. So for instance, I'm a black man who's 6'3". I've now shaved my hair off. I've got a beard. Probably needs a little bit of weight, but that's a me problem. That's no one else's. But yeah, other than that, I'm wearing pink today because I thought it brought the colours of my eyes. Flutter, flutter, flutter. But yes, Geoff, please introduce yourself, who you are, what you're about, and what you feel comfortable sharing before we jump into your first L.
So, Geoff, I'm a reverend. I, like Matt, do shave my head. I haven't got a beard. Quite a bit older than Matt and quite a bit shorter than Matt, and I'm definitely carrying too much weight. But that's me. I've been a minister now for 3 years. Came to the Lord quite late and got called. I feel very blessed to have been called to this ministry, and I try to do what Matt said. I try to, well, not just do my ministry, but live my life with a smile on my face. But he's right. There have been times where there weren't smiles. I grew up in the East End of London. I was born in Stratford. I moved around quite a bit with my parents. We moved into Kent and then into Hertfordshire. Since I've been an adult, I have lived mostly sort of starting in Stratford, Hainault, Collier Row. I've lived around these sort of areas all of my life. I got married very, very young. I was only 21 when I got married for the first time, and that was effectively what became a left turn instead of a right turn after 13 years of marriage and 2 children. Prior to that, I'd been made redundant twice from jobs in the city where I was relatively well paid, and ended up being a driving instructor of all things for 3 years before I went back to the city. But no, life has not always been easy. So that first 12 years or so, children growing up, that was lovely. And my children are all grown and have got children of their own now, so they're a real joy. And so even though that marriage ended as an L, it led on to things that were much better in my life. So that's a good thing. But going through those situations, particularly divorce and particularly redundancy, they sort of tear your life apart a bit. And sometimes your partner at the time, this is my ex-wife, doesn't really help. I came home and told her that I'd been made redundant, and there was no sympathy. The first comment I got was, "Does that mean my lovely company car's got to go back?" Which, that's hurtful. Nothing about, "Oh, are you all right? What are we going to do?" Nothing. No, have I got to give up my car? But I'm afraid we're civil to each other now, some 25 years on, but we were never going to be the best of buddies again. And I think anybody who has to go through those sort of things is going to look at it as a time in their life where it really, really feels like you're losing everything. I was being treated for depression after the divorce. It's the only time I've ever been on drugs for depression, and I wasn't on them for very long. But it's a horrible thing to go through.
Wow, a bit of a roller coaster in terms of events that's happened in your life. But as much as I'm just kind of taking it in what you said, I'm not surprised that things like that could have happened, because from my personal experience, I find that most people that have that sense of joy, that sense of sincerity about themselves are doing it because I guess it's they know what they would have wanted in that time in their lives, and you don't necessarily know what people are going through. And it sounds, yeah, like I said, a roller coaster. In regards to the separation, if we go back to where the context would begin, just to paint a picture so we could understand, because, yeah, being made redundant, the first thing that comes out of someone's mouth is, just to get out the company car. Not what's my well-being, what's, hello, why are you home early? Why do you look like that? My car.
Yeah. No, that is one of those things that you come home, you've told them some devastating news, and they've reacted like that. And I guess I should have seen something then that told me there was going to be problems with this relationship. I mean, it was a bad time. I mean, in the city, everybody knows. I mean, I wasn't one of the most well-paid people, but in the city of London, people are paid a good salary, and I was earning a good salary. And so there we are. We're living in a house with a big mortgage, and no real way of knowing how to deal with that because there wasn't any other jobs around. And then on top of that, to find out that my wife was having an affair with a fella, and she didn't even do it particularly quietly. So it was somebody she did some work for, and he had nowhere to live. And I said, yeah, of course he can live in the spare room, not knowing at all what's going on. Until one day I came home early from, I was a year out of work, and then I said I did driving lessons, And I came home early because one was cancelled, and little baby boy was sitting in the living room, no one around. I went upstairs, found them in the bedroom together. And so these are the sort of things that kick you in the gut. And I wanted to keep giving it a try because I'd always said I didn't want a divorce because I knew my parents had and how horrible it was. So the marriage had seemed all right, but I guess with the car comment, I should have had some idea that things weren't 100% great. Not worrying about me in any way. Let's just worry about, have I got to give my nice car back? It made you feel, I don't know, less than, well, not really worth anything. I think that was the hardest thing. The fact that there was it didn't seem to be any compassion about what had happened. As you say, I've come in, I've shared this bad news, and all she said is, I've got to give the car back, have I?
Did she have elements or traits from early doors that you suspected she was like this, looking back in hindsight? Because you said you got married pretty young. What was the lead time between you dating or courting, whatever phrase you want to go with, up until you proposing and then get married?
Well, when I met her, I was 18, she was 16, and we started dating then. It was a long distance relationship because I lived in East London, she lived in Milton Keynes.
Wow.
So that was the first thing. And we got engaged when I was probably just 20 and married when I was 21 and a half. So it wasn't a long time, but we'd been together, by the time we got married, we'd been together for 3 years, just over 3 years. And I hadn't really cottoned on to the fact that there was anything like that potentially coming up at all. She was my mum's cousin. And when I told my dad who I was seeing and who I was marrying, he told me to have nothing to do with that family because he was already divorced from my mum by then. And he said, it's just going to end in heartache. But I don't know about you, when you were 18, did I ever listen to my dad? No, I don't think I ever did. Particularly as he'd been out of my life for 2 years, because when he left when I was 16, I just didn't want to see him because I was hurt, not necessarily just for me, but for my mum. And so I didn't really have a lot to do with him. But then that's what he told me. And of course, I didn't listen. And eventually he was proved to be right. No, I never really saw anything like that particularly. But then maybe I'm a little bit naive, or I certainly was back then when we were married, that I just didn't see the behaviour that apparently other people did see. Because when it all happened, I was doing the driving school, and my driving school partner, who was my best friend at the time, he said to me, you know, she flirts with everyone. He said, she's even been flirting with me, your best friend. And so when it came, I suppose, you know, it just wasn't, at the end, it wasn't a massive surprise, but it still hurts. And I think it's, when are we talking about? Yeah, I knew God by then. Had I not known God, I think I could easily have gone completely off the rails. I got depressed. There were times where I thought, well, what's the point? But, you know, you just got to push on. It was not, bizarrely, it wasn't easy to rely on God because I thought, well, what are you doing to me? You know, I'm new into your family and you're letting this happen. So I wasn't particularly in a great place with that. But it is just, I don't know, the worst thing that can happen to anybody, I think. I just wouldn't want anybody to go through the things that I went through in that time, because it's very unpleasant.
It does sound really bad. And the reason why I say that I can understand why it's a bit rough is because hearing some of the stories I've heard of other people who have been cheated on and so forth like that, you feel that I have no reason to doubt this individual. I've committed myself to the individual. They've also reciprocated that commitment to me.
Mm-hmm.
And if they've told me to go into the shop, I'm going to believe they've gone to the shop.
Yeah.
Oh, I was late. Why was you late? There was traffic. There was a queue. Okay, I'll take it at face value.
Exactly.
And all these multiple situations that have occurred, you're now having to relive all of them and start doing an audit on them to work out, is this fact or fiction?
Yeah, you have.
How silly was I? I was doing this and I was blissfully unaware that X, Y, and Z was possibly going on, which could then, I know people will say it's not good to dwell in the past for too long, but when you've been with a person for an extended period of time, and then they've done something like this that then makes you cast doubt, you're now spending longer than you should in the past, reliving certain situations that may or may not have happened, because at this point, you can't trust what they're saying because of what's gone on.
No.
So now you're just having to say, who do I have to trust? I have to go and just get all the receipts together and make sure everything adds up.
Yeah.
I can only imagine how much that would mess with you mentally.
It does.
How much it was just challenge you. And like you said, you found God, you was in that new relationship, and you're feeling potentially, correct me if I'm wrong, please do, what's going on here? I took the leap of faith. Here I am. I'm trying to be a good person here. And right now I find out that there's a dagger on my back and it's been twisted several times over, and I thought it was just back pain.
Yeah. Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. I mean, you think I know that God's there, I know that he loves me, and yet this is happening, and how and why is he letting this happen? And it does feel, you definitely feel like you've been stabbed in the back. And what upset me as well, there was when this, almost when it came to a head, one of the guys in church, he doesn't come to our church anymore, he'd found out that she was having an affair before I did, and we were on the verge of being confirmed, going to church and having confirmation service. And we were actually in the church, ready to go through with it. And she said, I can't do it. I'm not in the right place. So I got confirmed. She didn't. The reason she didn't get confirmed is because this guy had challenged her on it and said, if you're not going to tell him, I'm going to tell him. But he didn't tell me. And before he had the chance to tell me was when I found him and her with the lover in our house. So he didn't have a chance to tell me before I found that out. But he told me that he had known, and that was a betrayal for me. I'm his Christian brother, and he didn't tell me. So that's another betrayal, and you think, God, what are you doing? Why are you letting all these things happen? It's very hurtful, and I did get a phone call once at home while she was there from the man's wife, telling me, you do know that your wife is having an affair with my husband? And I said, no, I didn't know that. And she said, well, she is. She sees him here. I've got photographs, all sorts of stuff. So I said, okay, well, I'll have to. She's denying it, so I can't do anything about that. And she literally stood there and barefaced lied to me that, no, we're not having an affair. We're not. I'm not seeing him. And Mr. Gullible, just as you say, people that you've spent a long time with, who you trust, you're just going to take their word for it. And unfortunately, on this occasion, it wasn't the right thing to do.
Do you think that what flamed the fans of your innocence, your naivety, was simply because of what happened as you growing up, witnessing your parents having a divorce, thinking, I'm not going to walk away from this. I'm going to give this every opportunity for this to stay intact?
Yeah, that's exactly how I felt. I'd always said to myself, I don't want to get divorced. And even when I found out and she said, yes, I'll leave him, and I think twice we tried to make it work, but then she kept seeing him. So eventually you have to accept the fact that she's not going to change. She's not going to give him up. And therefore, you have to try and move on. And it wasn't easy. I think that's when I got depressed, because I had tried lots of things. I desperately wanted it to work, and it didn't. So I think the biggest problem with it, I mean, all right, we'd been married 13 years, 14 years, something like that. It was a long time. But the biggest problem was not, well, it was. The biggest problem was we weren't going to be together. But the other problem was I wasn't going to be living with my kids anymore, who were sort of 8 and 6 at the time.
So can I ask, why wouldn't you be living with the kids?
Because she moved out and moved in with the fella in a house in Romford, but she was taking the kids with her. But then I still wanted to get her back, and she said, I want to come home. And so I took her back, and they came back. Then it was obvious she wasn't going to give up, so I didn't have any options but to move out. I moved in with a very good friend of mine, and I was living with him for the best part of 3 years, I think, 2 or 3 years.
Was there not an option for you to have the kids, since she was the one that stepped out of the house, so we say?
Didn't really work like that at that time. And I was working full time by then, back up in the city, and so therefore, me having the kids, having custody of the kids, was not really going to work. I mean, don't get me wrong, I didn't not get to see them, but it's not the same as coming home every night and seeing the little faces welcome you home. It's not the same thing. But no, I saw them every weekend. If there were weekends where they said we've got things to do, then I stepped back and let them do them, because that's, I think, as a father, that's what you've got to do.
So how did it impact you? Yes, you fought tooth and nail, from the sounds of it, to hold on and try and keep this together, regardless of how shattered and broken into various and numerous pieces it was. How much did it cut you when it came to the point of, my kids are living what I had to live, or a version of that?
Yeah, I'm not even sure I consciously thought that. I mean, looking back on it, I can see that I tried to make it as easy for them as possible. And let me say, they were quite young, and so those sort of ages, they adapt quite well. But I don't think I really thought about it at the time. I don't think I went there with, they've got to live the life I had to live, and how sad I was about that. And obviously I was sad about it, but I don't think I realised that that's what they were going to go through, the same as I went through. I don't think it would be good for me to have been in the house just arguing with their mum all the time. And so me moving out, being somewhere else, was better for them. And ultimately, it was probably better for me, because it did make me understand that there wasn't any hope for resurrecting that relationship. And so, it was easier just to step away and just see them every time I could, which I did.
So when you said that you went into depression, or a state of depression, due to the relationship breaking down and realizing there was no hope for it anymore.
Yep.
At the time, what do you feel was the driving factor of you going into that state?
Being alone. I mean, I'd always wanted, I know it's not everybody's cup of tea, but I always wanted to be in a settled relationship, married with children. And all of a sudden I wasn't. And it was just the being alone part. I don't think, if you think about it, we'd been together since I was 18. This all happened in, 1989, 90. So I was like 31, 32, maybe 33. So I'd never been alone. I'd never gone to university, so I'd never lived alone. I'd never not been in a relationship effectively until this time. And I felt very lonely, as it were. I mean, I had some good friends around me. The guy that we built a driving school together, Peter, who sadly is no longer with us, he was an absolute rock. The guy that I went to live with, who was my other best friend, Nick, who also is sadly no longer with us. Maybe it's my fault, who knows. Get a best friend and they keep losing them. But without those people around me, and without the family, the church family people being there to be supportive and pray for you, yeah, I think I could easily have fallen apart. I was very lonely, didn't like it. I mean, God's been very, very good to me after that, because he has found me a lovely new wife, as you know. That was not without its complications. There were lots of issues, but we've now been married since 1998, 26 years, and we got together a year before that. So what was a bad situation, God used for good. Even though it was hard at the time, because we went through a lot of issues with the church, because we were both members of the church. So yeah, it was an easy start, but it's grown and grown and grown, and I'm very blessed. I feel I'm very blessed.
That's really positive, and congratulations on your long-standing relationship.
Thank you.
Long may it continue.
Mm.
So, I'm gonna kind of go back to like when you was not in a good place mentally.
Yeah.
How did that impact your relationship with those around you, such as your parents, your peers, the friend who you were staying with at the time? Work must have been a bit challenging if you're not in that stable surrounding that you want to be in. And ultimately, what was your relationship with God at that point? Because
I mean, you're right. All of those things were affected in different ways, but we spoke right at the start about the fact that I go through life with a smile on my face. And even in those dark times, I still managed mostly, not always, mostly to be able to do that. So then people at work knew what I'd gone through and were really, really supportive and very encouraging. I mean, the guy who was my boss, we're talking about 1994 now, when I started work with him, and he is an absolute rock. He is still a very good friend of mine, and the people I work with just kept my spirits up, I suppose. The relationship with my dad has always been, it's funny because my dad's 83 now, and so he's from a generation that, unlike me, who shows his feelings all the time, he doesn't show his feelings. I can't remember when we were growing up him actually ever telling me he loved me. And in fact, I can't even remember him telling me that up to this day. And I'm 65 and he's 83. I think I know that he loves me, but I don't think he's ever said it. And that's because of the generation he's from. But then, all those people you talk about, I got on very well with my mum. I lost her quite young. She was only 69. She would have been the same age as my dad, so it's 14 odd years ago. I was very much, my mum was always one that, a bit like me, would always be upbeat, smiling, cheery, and helped with everybody's problems. And I suppose that's one of the things that I get from her that I bring into my ministry, because I'm there to help people, and that's what I want to do. But
it's quite interesting that you said that the people at work knew. For a lot of people, that would have been a stigma. That would have been something people may not have wanted to disclose willingly. So how did you approach that situation when it came to it?
well, I knew that it wasn't something I wanted to have happen to me, but I never really considered it to be a stigma. It's happened, it's what it is, so we move on. And I was very happy to tell them, I'm going through a tough time. I've been divorced and I'm struggling, and it's not easy. I've been depressed, and I'm looking to move forward. But I didn't ever consider that it was a stigma for me. It obviously was in my younger years, because I thought, I don't want to go through that like my dad's and my mum have gone through. I don't want to do that, because theirs was quite, I suppose it was quite bitter, and theirs had an added complication, because as they were divorcing, my mum became pregnant with my youngest brother, who's 16 years younger than me, and that was literally she'd become pregnant, and then he left, and that was it. So I never really had as bad a time as that, but I never Then I probably thought, yeah, this is not a good thing. It probably was a stigma, but I never considered that to, to be at the forefront of any thinking that I had when I was going through it myself. I knew that it wasn't a great thing, but that was more, it wasn't a great thing personally.
Yeah. But then even when you said, it sounds like you're talking about in past tense. So you've been divorced,
Yep,
you've been cheated on.
yep,
But when it happened, because I remember clearly you felt that you was betrayed
yep,
by that brother because he didn't tell you.
yeah,
One of the questions I did want to ask you, I was kind of hoping to ask later on, but we'll address it here if that's all right with you. If I knew someone was doing something they shouldn't be doing, and then I'm now dragged into it,
yep.
I don't really want to get involved because this is not my place to be.
No, I still understand that.
But I then get dragged into it by way of I connected the dots before anyone else did.
Yeah,
And I was going to say something, you found out beforehand, you feel betrayed by me, and it's so like, God, what did I do? Help me to understand how you felt, like as clear and honest as you can, because this is your truth.
mm.
And then how would you have liked them to have dealt with the situation?
Yeah. Okay, I see where you're coming from. The person that found this out. I mean, I in the same way that Holly does now. I was part of the music group, and the guy that found out was the leader of the music group. So he and I were tight. We were very close, and I don't know quite what I would have expected him to say, but I think I would have expected him to say something. He said he said nothing except to her, in an effort to try and make her tell me. So I did feel that as a Christian brother, and I know that you don't want to step into a situation like that. But if he'd already effectively inserted himself in the situation, but only by talking to her, not to me. And so I don't. I would like to think that if somebody I was very close to, if I found out something that was happening that would threaten their whatever relationship, life, whatever it might be, that I would be able to at least take them aside and say, look, there's things going on that you don't know about that are going to be hurtful. Something like that. Even if he didn't want to say exactly what it was, because he knew exactly what it was and who it was and everything. But yeah, that felt like a betrayal because we were that close. If it had been just somebody in the congregation who I knew but I wasn't particularly close with, and they didn't tell me, I'm sure I wouldn't have felt the same way. I think it was because we were so close that it hurt more.
Did you guys resolve it, or that relationship was never the same again?
No, the truth is, it was never the same again. I mean, for a little while it was, but then, as I said, when Susan and I got together, we were both from the church. We're both from broken marriages, and there were some issues over that with people who didn't think it was right and didn't want, thought that we were going against God's law and all sorts of stuff. And he got upset about that as well. And so, don't get me wrong, I still see him, I still talk to him. I know that he's a lovely, lovely guy, but what he did back then sort of spoiled the relationship to a degree, really.
I hear you. And I guess, and I could be wrong, but this is, I guess, I don't even know it's called devil advocate because I'm just thinking aloud in terms of I would like to think that if I suspected something was going on, and as eloquently as I can be saying, I've connected the dots, I can see it, 2020 vision, I'm still speculating until I see the deed being done. I'm speculating.
Yeah.
But then would I want to be the person to say, hey, here's some doubt, nudge, 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 wink, wink, wink. But tell me more. I don't have the evidence. I don't have the smoking gun. I don't have the red. I don't have the red paint. You have to go speak to your other half who can tell you factually what's happened. So by me nudging them to do it means that that conversation can be had, and any receipts you're looking for, they can provide it. I can't. And I want to put that, see the doubt in your mind. would I want to cause you that much anguish and pain from seeing that lovely smile that you wear so often to suddenly just have every color fade from your skin, and then dread going home, sit in the car thinking about what you're going to say, when you're going to say it? Can you look at your kids the same way? Personally, I wouldn't want to be that person. I would potentially say there's elements of that possibly in how they was, but I don't know. Have you thought about that side of it at all?
Yeah, I mean, I did think, possibly that from his point of view, getting further involved and talking to me about it would have, as you say, caused me some pain that he wouldn't have wanted to cause, because he's a very gentle man, and he wouldn't necessarily want to hurt anybody deliberately. And so, yeah, you could be right that that's part of what he's doing. But he knew it was going on. It wasn't suspicions, because he had challenged her on it, and she'd admitted it, which is why she wouldn't go through with the confirmation, because she knew she was in a bad place. She knew she was doing something that God wouldn't approve of. But for him, I guess he could easily have been in that place where he doesn't want to cause me pain, but he made it perfectly clear to her. He'd given her, I think, some kind of ultimatum: unless you tell him by such and such, I am going to tell him. But then fate took over, and I found out regardless. So, I mean, I don't. Looking back on it, it did feel like a betrayal at the time, but I don't bear him any ill will about it.
But you still felt something at that time.
At the time, I did, yeah, definitely.
And then that happened. I can only imagine how you must have felt going, not only are you doing this in our house,
Yeah,
you left our child downstairs,
yeah.
and any and all conversation I had after that. How did it feel stepping into church the next time?
Yeah, it wasn't easy. I think there aren't very many times where I've put a mask on, but I think I did then. I am who I am, and I'm very happy to let people see who I am, the good and the bad. But I think that first time I went back in, I was thinking, I need God more than I've ever needed him now. And so I couldn't stay away, so I went, even though I probably didn't feel like it. In fact, I'm sure I didn't feel like going. But it was important that that relationship with God was not fractured because of this. And it was hard, because I did feel like, well, always feels like it's the end of the world, something like this. But relying on God was all I could do at the time, and two very good friends. If I didn't have good friends around me at the time, I could have done something stupid.
So what did your friends provide you with at that time?
I think just the fact of being there. I think everybody, there was a lot of making sure that I was busy, not alone, not sitting indoors moping about it. And so they sort of looked after me in that way, particularly the guy whose house I went to live in. And we had some good laugh. He worked in the city the same as I did, and we had some good laughs both up in the city and at home. There was another guy staying there. The three of us, it was almost like men behaving badly with three guys in the house instead of two. But we had some laughs, and it just took the pain away, I suppose. It was almost like they were the ibuprofen to my grief, my pain. Yeah, it was very much them drawing alongside me to make sure that I wasn't left sort of stewing over it. And there was a lot of that. I still did some, even when they were trying not to let me.
Well, you're gonna feel what you feel. It's inevitable. Anytime, people can make you laugh, can have music play and all sorts, but there's always going to be that moment of stillness,
Yeah,
where you're left alone with your own thoughts, your own current reality,
yeah,
or what you understand it to be as your reality.
mm,
And you've got to face it. And a lot of us do try and run from it. That's why so many of us have vices where we just do it to distract us from what we don't want to face.
yeah.
But when you was going through your depressive state, you said you took medication for that.
only for a short while. I didn't take it for very long, but I saw my doctor and told him all the situation and how I was feeling, and he said, "Yeah, it seems like you're quite depressed. I'm going to give you some drugs to help you through it." And it wasn't very long, probably, I don't know, a couple of months tops, and then I was off them.
But then what led you to actually speak to your GP? Because not a lot of men, unfortunately, are willing to speak up in general terms, let alone, I'm going to call the GP, take myself down there, and then take said medication that's prescribed to me.
What led me to do it, and very few people know this, is that I made a very weak attempt at ending my life. I took some tablets, but it wasn't a real attempt because I really didn't take very many. And I woke up the next morning and thinking, oh, I've woken up. I think I need to go and see the doctor. And so that's why I went to the doctor. It wasn't my finest moment, but that's where I was at the time. I just felt, what is the point? Why am I carrying on? But I'd not even remotely taken enough to make any difference. It didn't even make me ill. But he said, yeah, you're obviously depressed. Let's do something about it. So painful though it was, it had to happen probably to get me to see him and get sorted out a bit, really.
It's always unfortunate to hear about someone considering or even taking actions to end their own life. I think that speaks volume as to how much pain you're actually going through, despite the smile you wore. Because I always find to wear a smile is great. It's the best thing you can wear. And if I'm talking to my wife, it's the best thing she can only wear. But besides that, it's one of those things where to find that smile that people relate to you because it's authentic means you kind of have to find your happy place.
Yeah.
But if you found a version of your happy place, but still was in that place where you was willing to go, I just can't keep feeling this anymore because it's just,
don't do this. Yeah.
That just feels so bad. Did you ever consider who you'd be leaving behind if that actually went the full course?
Thing is, it was literally a spur of the moment thing. I don't even know what set it off, if I'm honest. But it was a spur of the moment thing. And I came home and I was just in that place where I just thought there's really no point anymore. You know, I knew God, and even that wasn't making me feel any better. And so I didn't really think about what I was leaving behind. I mean, if you've got two kids who are those sort of ages, then suicide is very, very selfish. And I understand that now. And it would have been awful if I had done that. And I would have missed out on so much because they're grown up, they're lovely kids. My daughter's got 3 children, my son's got 2 children, lovely husbands and wives. And I would have missed all that. And I would have missed what God had for me with Susan. So, you know, it was stupid. And I realised that the next morning, how stupid it was. It might have been that God had to let me do that just to realise how stupid it was. And, you know, since then, it's never crossed my mind again, ever. Even in that period after that, before I met Susan. But, yeah, I'm not proud of that moment. But I'm glad that I effectively didn't get it right.
So am I. And I don't mean to dwell on it as much as I am. I just find that these conversations are important to have because you said you came home and you just, personally, I don't completely buy that for the sole reason that I feel just like how the cliffs are created from erosion, where you have just waters crashing against it over time. It just eats away, it eats away, eats away. You can have a frog in. If you put a frog in boiling water, it will jump straight out. You put it in lukewarm water and then turn the heating up gradually and gradually, it will stay in there until it dies. Death lives in complacency. you was clearly in a place, this is my opinion, by the way, but in my mind, you was clearly in a place where things have just been eating at you, eating at you, eating at you. And instead of you seeing progress, you've been seeing the opposite.
Mm.
And you just got to the point where you're thinking, I'm swimming against the tide here.
Yeah.
I'm trying to ice skate uphill. What's the point in me exerting all this energy to be in a deficit?
Yeah. To not get anywhere.
What is the point?
Yeah.
So I might as well give up.
Yeah.
Why am I even participating when everyone else is running and I'm an amputee?
Yeah.
I have no prosthetics to help me.
Yeah.
I am just literally struggling, and people are seeing me, potentially not doing anything to support me.
Mm.
And
What's the point?
that's the part where one of my passions is that more people speak up, that people embrace who they are at every junction of their lives.
Mm.
And it's not always doable because we're not always accepting. We're not always meeting people where they're at. We want them to meet us where we are at.
Yeah.
Because we're selfish like that. And sometimes we, like when you're a parent and you have children, you want them to be over to the left a little bit more, over to the right, or a bit further forward, or a bit further back. We're never happy until we meet them where they are and where they meet us where we are. That's a beautiful union, if possible, to ever achieve.
Yes.
But I just like when people are willing to share and talk openly, honestly about the situation, because I have such a fear that death resides in taboo topics.
It does.
And if people don't talk more about their suicide attempts, their depression states that they've been through, what they did and how they came out of it, it scares me because I'm thinking, if we don't talk about this more, people won't know that they're not the only ones gone through these feelings, and that hopefully through not following through on that, things could turn around. You didn't know that things were going to turn around, but
No.
you tried what you tried. You got on the phone to the GP. You then took yourself to the GP, because I think that's very important. Not only asking for help, but actually willing to accept it. I think that's very important.
Yeah.
But you just seem to be there. What would you say were major contributing factors to you being as proactive as you were to get yourself in a better place?
I think there's a sense that you get to a point where you realise you can't keep going on the way it's going, and depending on what kind of character you are, you either, as you said before, you either just give up completely, or you think actually there is something worth fighting for. And I think my relationship with Jesus at the time started to make the difference. That next morning after I'd tried this and I'd seen the doctor, I realised that there were people who cared about me and there were people who loved me. Yes, I wasn't in a relationship that I wanted to be in. However, there were people that were willing to journey with me and help me through any difficult times. So I think that's what made me be proactive. The fact that I knew that there were people, even if I didn't the night before, who were willing to help me and to see me back on a path that would bring me back in line with what God wanted for my life. And if you think about from that time to now what God has done in my life, it's amazing. So,
What do you think was I don't want to say the turning point, because it's evident that it was that time when you attempted to take your life. But even if that happens, there's a part on the journey of the grief curve where you still got to experiment progression forward, and sometimes you might find that you have to do 200% worth of work just to catch up to the masses,
yeah,
and then you still have to maintain that over a prolonged period of time just to keep up, let alone make any significant progress. What was it for you? Yes, you realize I need help after you realize, oh, I'm awake. I didn't do a good enough job. After that, what then motivated you to keep going? Because every day, every challenge was an opportunity for you to go back to where you just come from.
I don't know that there was any specific thing. However, I do know that from that moment I decided to go and see the doctor and get that medication and realized that there were people around me that loved me, that was my motivation to keep going and to push on. And my thoughts just changed. I was obviously feeling at the lowest ebb I've ever been. I was in a depressive state, but I got hold of the fact that yes, there is a life worth living, and I'm going to live it. It was that after that day, the realization, as you said, about had it worked, who do I leave behind, and the realization that I would have left my kids behind spurred me on to be better and to not even think about doing that again. I love my kids; they're my joy, and I would have hated to have done that to them. You know, they're both really fabulous people. They've grown up to be really nice people. They've both married really good partners, and they have lovely families. And I would have hated to have spoilt any of that because I wasn't around for them. And I think that's, you know, the other motivation is that knowing that people love me and that there were people that depended on me made me push forward. Knowing Jesus made a big, big difference. I mean, I don't know how people go through situations like this without knowing Jesus, because without that hope that you have in Jesus, then the situation must feel so much worse than what I was feeling at the time. And maybe they wouldn't have got it wrong if they went through those things. So yeah, that I think knowing all of a sudden, or the realization that I was loved, even if I wasn't in a relationship, dragged me from the brink of the abyss, if you like.
Yeah, that's really good to hear. Let's assume you go back in time. Nothing changes about your life you have right here and now. But you go back in time, you speak to your younger self at your lowest point. What are you saying to yourself to encourage yourself to just keep going? Don't let this get on top of you. You got this. What are you saying?
So this is me now talking to the me when I was at my lowest point, yeah?
Yeah.
Well, I think the first thing I would have said is whatever you do, don't do this, because God is going to give you a life that is even better than the one you're grieving over. It's going to be all that you want, all that you need. And if you do this now, you're going to miss out on all of it. Because I guess in some ways, so, do you ever, I think about this quite a bit because of what my dad said about when I was going to marry my first wife. You know, don't do it because the family's bad. Don't do it. And you ignore it. And I just wonder, it's a bit like the story of Lazarus and the rich ruler, when they keep sending messengers and the rich ruler says, can you send Lazarus to give me a drink? He said, I sent people to you all the time and you didn't listen. And I just wonder whether in our pig-headedness, whether we would actually listen to any of this advice. But that's what I would tell my younger self.
If there's a hint of suspicion that the younger version of yourself would not listen,
Yeah.
how would you have to communicate to yourself in order for you to actually pay attention?
Oh, I see. That's a trickier question. Yeah, I don't know how I'll deal with that one. The only way that you could possibly make it work is you'd have to just draw alongside your young self and just try and fill them with hope, because it's the lack of hope that makes you push for doing something like that. How you'd word that, I'm not sure. You can tell them everything that's going to happen in the future that they would miss out on, and you would have to hope that that would be enough to pull them out of it, really. I'm not sure it would work, but
But then in theory, is that not what you do to the people that you minister to?
I suppose it is in a lot of ways. You know, you're there to support. You know, somebody comes and tells you there's an issue, and you're there to guide them through it and give them support and tell them, look, It's not the end of the world. Jesus is there. You have hope in him. So it's not always easy to do that, but it is important. So all you can do is use your own experiences, whatever they might be, redundancy, loss of a loved one, divorce, any of those things that people go through, and use your life experience to be able to encourage them and show them that actually it's not the end. It's a different season and something different is going to happen, but it's not the end of the world. Jesus still loves you. Your church family still love you. We're all there to support you and help you with whatever you need. And that's all they can do. That's what the ministry of being a reverend is, I suppose.
So it's not the end of the story, it's just the end of that chapter.
Correct. That's exactly it. We were talking about, where was I talking about this week? It might even have been the sermon. I don't know. Yeah, it was. It was on Sunday. It was a Sunday sermon. No, it wasn't. No, I apologise. It was the planning meeting for the sermon in 2 weeks' time, which is the last Encanto one, where there's a disaster coming, but this is not the end of the story. And I was talking exactly about that. So
In alignment there, see? So I like asking that question about, would you listen to your younger self? Because there's a lot of times where we can eloquently say things and we're like, say, I'll say this, I'll say that, I'll paint this picture, rah, rah, rah. But would you have listened to yourself? Because you know what you was like at that age. You probably wouldn't. And I asked the question because I know I could say things very eloquently now, but I know my pig-headedness wouldn't have listened to myself. So I would have probably had to hold me tight because I know I missed out on that. From another guy just to hold me, who cared for me when I fight and pushed away, just hold me and just spend that time with me. Maybe I don't have to talk as much, just sit there and just be with me.
Yeah.
I say that because there's someone out there, hopefully that's listening, that was also feeling like, yeah, I hear what you said, but that's not going to resonate with me. So what can I do differently? There's going to be people who have people like you in their life,
Yeah,
who's going through what they're going through, and they want to be able to know, how can I comfort them? How can I support them?
sometimes just giving somebody a hug and holding them is what makes all the difference. It really is. So it's knowing the right time and the right person as well, because some people just wouldn't respond to that. But it is a big thing. I mean, I'm definitely a hugger in church. I'll be a hugger, and I am. Well, before I was reverend, and even now to a degree, if new people came in the back of the church, I was nearly always the first one to go up to them and say hi and welcome and everything else that goes with it. And so, that is just part of my nature. It's harder now that I'm a reverend because I'm normally doing things up the front when people come in at the back. So not so easy, but giving, as you say, just holding on to someone, not letting them go, can be a very powerful message. And so perhaps that would have been the way to have reached me back then. I think it might have been.
So going through all that you've gone through in that situation, initially you'd have said that was an L. I didn't win a single thing in that whole situation. If that's not an L in hindsight, what are you calling it?
That's a good question. I think if I'm not going to put it down as an L, I have to put it down as an opportunity to move on, to change my life, to live the life God wants me to live, and to find the relationship that you always wanted to be in, moving forward. Because whatever you go through, when it's over, you have to look at the opportunity it brings you. And so that's what I would call it, an opportunity to look at and move forward at where God wants to take you.
I like that. And for me, it's quite evident that you've been through some ordeals. Clearly there's more there because you're a man of many lived experiences, but you never gave up. You had hope. And that's, as people can probably testify from, not just this podcast, but my other podcast, 2 Minute Quick Charge. I just like to inspire hope wherever I can, and wherever people find hope, just cling on to that, because without it, it just feels like you're living in a hopeless world, and it can be depressing. It can be a whole manner of things that is just not pleasant. But to hear someone, like I said at the beginning, as positive, as authentic, as sincere as you, but then to know all this stuff's going on, I kind of fall back to a phrase that I kind of coined a little while ago, but no one knows about it because haven't done a podcast for a while. It's a sandpaper moment. Like, sandpaper is rough, but when you work it on a surface, that thing comes out polished. It's smooth, it's refined. That's how a lot of us are after we've gone through that hardship. No pun intended. It's just the fact that sometimes we have to go through that just to be refined.
Yep.
The Bible talks about going through fire and us coming out refined in that aspect.
Yep.
There's so many ways you can play it, but you rarely ever come across a strong person who's had an easy pass, because you have a sense of accomplishment, self-appreciation. It's so hard to have all your priorities stacked up in a row on a wall, to have an earthquake happen and then not to be in dismay, looking at it all on the floor. Some of them are broken because they can't ever be achieved for one reason or another, and go, crumb. And then you have to reprioritize because this earthquake's happened and you realize maybe number one isn't no longer number one, it's number 10 or even an option. I just love hearing people share their stories and tell us about how life really is, and not what social media sometimes portray it to be or the news portray it to be. I just got so much time and respect for people that are willing to jump on and share their stories and just be authentically themselves, not just off here, but when they're on here as well. As I said, I am greatly appreciative. What I'll ask you to do is spend the next few minutes, or a couple of minutes, I say, and just promote anything and everything you got going on and how people can reach you if they want to.
Yeah, no. We discussed doing something on a Saturday morning, a sort of a gathering of men who have got young children in the church, just for them to come and to be themselves and just to share some things amongst them while the kids are playing, share a bit of breakfast. So I'm going to talk to you about that a bit more. It's great when people connect into the men's stuff that we do. I know that we meet in the pub once a month, which I love to see the guys there. It's not overtly Christian. We're just blokes chatting to each other and answering questions like you've asked, and knowing who you can talk to, and just having someone to support you. We've got another curry night coming up in September. We're going to try and do some other things as well, I think. It's good to be in a place now where I know what God's purposes are for me. I know what he wants me to be doing. As you know, I've been being a chaplain at Chelmsford Prison, and that's very rewarding. And it's, this is a place that's full of men that have got issues and needs. And if I can help in any way, God's shown me that that's what he wants me to do. And so there we are. It's been great to be on. I've really enjoyed it.
Much appreciated. But again, appreciate you jumping on. And to everyone listening, I hope you took away something very positive, something very uplifting. Hopefully you learned a little bit more about a man he's a minister. Yet you hear the stuff that's gone on in his life and you're probably thinking, how, why, what exactly? Just because some people are sitting in a church ministering to people, you think they've got an easy, cushy life. It's not as easy as that. The math doesn't always add up the way you think it does. Just understand, a lot of us all go through various situations and we have the ability to accept it in a way that we want. It could either be life happens to us or life happens for us. It's all about perception, and if you have a good relationship with God and you're willing to be open-minded about the various possibilities it could be, hopefully you pick the right one and lean on the right decision that gives you hope and helps you to have the courage you need to keep pushing forward and not sit in dismay and feeling sad for yourself. Just know your right now is not your forever. And there's nothing about a caterpillar that takes going to be a butterfly. Enjoy yourself and catch you in the next episode.
Every L Podcast. Every L Podcast.